this week's edition of World Today. The biggest news development this week is the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that has been put into force. The 11-day deadly fight between the two sides caused a lot of destruction and loss of Palestinian lives. We'll talk about details of the Israel-Palestine conflict and how the ceasefire came about. But after an 11-day deadly fighting between Israel and Hamas, which led to massive destruction and loss of lives on the Palestinian side and forced many Israelis to take shelter from rockets, ceasefire finally was declared. The truce brokered by Egypt came into force on Thursday and has been welcomed by the international community.
I welcome the ceasefire between Gaza and Israel after 11 days of deadly hostilities. I extend my deepest condolences to the victims of the violence and their loved ones. I commend Egypt and Qatar for the efforts carried out in close coordination with the UN to help restore calm to Gaza and Israel. And I call on all sides to observe the ceasefire.
Celebrations were heard in the streets of Gaza minutes after the truce began as cars honked their horns and some guns were fired in the air. In the countdown to the 2 a.m. ceasefire deadline, Palestinian rocket salvos continued and Israel carried out at least one airstrike. While the contours of the truce deal have not been spelt out, for now, it is a respite from the violence that Gaza health officials claim killed 232 Palestinians, including 65 children, and wounded more than 1,900 in aerial bombardments. Israel said it had killed at least 160 combatants.
I extend my sincere gratitude to President al-Sisi and the senior Egyptian officials who played such a critical role in this diplomacy. I also appreciate the contributions of other parties in the region who have been engaged in working toward the end of hostilities.
Israel is a strategic ally of the United States of America in the Middle East, while Iran supports Palestine. Israel and Iran do not see eye to eye, and the West considers Iran one of the axes of evil. It'll take more than just Israel and Hamas backing down for peace and permanent solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. The United States of America, along with the West and the Arab nations, will have to come together first to define borders between Israel and Palestine and then to ensure that the communities live peacefully across borders. The West and the Arab nations have a role to play. Here's a report on what is the role each country has played in ensuring that tempers come down. This, even as Egypt brokered truce, is now in place.
On 17th May, UN Security Council's third emergency meet in a week ended with no concrete outcome. US blogged a joint statement calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. 2 days later, in his fourth call to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the US President Joe Biden asked for a path to peace.
And we're safer when we work together.
The two leaders had a detailed discussion on the state of events in Gaza, Israelis' progress in degrading the capabilities of Hamas and other terrorist elements, and ongoing diplomatic efforts by regional governments and the United States. The president conveyed to the prime minister that he expected a significant de-escalation today on the path to a ceasefire.
In response, Israel issued a press statement defending their stand.
אני מעריך במיוחד את התמיכה של נשיא ארצות הברית ידידנו ג'ו ביידן בזכות ההגנה העצמית של מדינת ישראל. אני נחוש להמשיך במבצע הזה עד שיושג היעד שלו להחזיר את השקט והביטחון לכם, אזרחי ישראל.
The conflict in Gaza got complicated with every passing day. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu claimed Iran was behind an armed drone intercepted by his country in a meeting with visiting German Foreign Minister a day later on 20th May.
While we're fighting on various fronts, the true backer of much of this aggression is Iran. Iran not only supports completely the Islamic Jihad in Gaza and gives them all the financing, they also give weapons to Hamas as well as to Hezbollah, and they provide the scaffolding on which these organizations really work. While we were engaged in these hostilities a few days ago, Iran sent an armed drone to Israel from Iraq or from Syria.
Hundreds of Tehran residents took part in a protest rally in the Iranian capital. General Hossein Salami, chief of powerful Revolutionary Guard Corps, addressed the rally.
فلسطین جدیدی ظهور پیدا کرده است. فلسطینی که دیگر نه با فلاخن و سنگ که با موشک می جنگد، یک فلسطین قوی که می تواند تمام تأسیسات صنعتی، همه پایگاه‌های هوایی، دیشب 6 پایگاه مهم راهبردی هوایی رژیم صهیونیستی زیر آتشباران قرار گرفت. این یک فلسطین جدید است.
The Arab League convened a meeting in Cairo on 19th May to express solidarity with Palestinians caught in the conflict between Hamas and Israel.
إن هذه الجرائم والسياسات العدوانية لهي جرائم حرب بل وجرائم ضد الإنسانية مكتملة الأركان، وتؤكد استخفاف سلطات الاحتلال بجميع قواعد القانون الدولي، وتعكس تحدياً سافراً لكافة قرارات الشرعية الدولية، كما تمثل استفزازاً لمشاعر الملايين من المسلمين والمسيحيين في جميع أنحاء العالم.
A day later on 20th May, Egyptian Foreign Minister met with a Palestinian official from Fatah. Egypt once again played a crucial role to broker a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
To break down what this really means and what's the way forward, I'm being joined by senior journalist Wael Awad. Dr. Awad, many thanks for joining us here in India today. If you could break down what this Egypt brokered peace deal or truce between Israel and Hamas really is.
Thank you, Geeta. I think what was agreed upon is what was the first demand of Hamas before the starting of the crisis. As you know, the crisis started in Sheikh al-Jarrah and the east province of Jerusalem, where next to Al-Aqsa Mosque, where the Israeli settlers were trying to capture the lands and take the land of the Palestinian 1948 Palestinian Israeli citizen there. So therefore, then the retaliation came from Israel, and Palestinian Hamas was saying that we wanted a complete ceasefire of all the hostilities and also to stop the grabbing of the land of the Palestinian, releasing all the detainees and the status quo of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So if these are the things have been agreed upon, then I think it is a win-win situation for both the sides, because Israel could not achieve its military objective as a full objective, where the bank of targets that Prime Minister Netanyahu was talking about. So I think it's some kind of a resolution came, but they have not released every detail of it, but the final detail remain in the draft where they have both signed on it.
Is there also a domestic angle to the entire story of Israel domestic politics and Prime Minister Netanyahu wanting to retain power?
Absolutely. He wanted not to retain power only. He wanted to go for a fresh election so he can delay his serving the sentence in jail, Geeta. The second part, which is very important here, we know ever since he has come with the Likud party, the right wing have taken over the activists, the peace activists within the Israeli society who wanted to have peace with the Arabs. Now, when he came with the Likud party and right wing, and he started depending on the right wing settlers who have won some seats in the Knesset, all this have given him the upper hand that he can only survive by submitting his or succumbing to the pressure from the settlers that we do not want the Arabs. Neither they are Christian or Muslim. As long as they are there, it's just for the Jewish. So he wanted to Judaize Jerusalem, which is the touch of the heart of the Muslim all over the world. It is as much important for Christianity, for Judaism, and for Islam. So you cannot touch this problem, and that is where his fault lies. I think he united the Palestinian against him as much as he divided the Israeli society against him.
Palestinian Authority also has been in a sort of a difficult position, given that they have no control over the Gaza Strip. They control the West Bank. And over here to then represent Gaza and the Hamas, even at the United Nations Security Council, where speaking of violence, and a lot of countries, including India, came out and condemned the rocket fires from the Hamas, has been sort of a conundrum for the Palestinian Authority.
I think the lesson the Palestinian learned, even the Palestinian Authority learned now, that they cannot talk of Palestinian as a whole cause if they don't include Hamas, because Hamas is the militant, the resistance to the occupation. If Mahmoud Abbas think that by going talk with the Israeli, and we can see, Geeta, Palestine has been annihilated totally by the Israelis. So I think he's playing at the cart on the Netanyahu. I think this war he has recognized, and they wanted to go for the election, and the election, they unified both sides. But there is a kind of lines which the red line the Israelis have drawn for Mahmoud Abbas. No reconciliation with Hamas. And that has been there for years. There where the Palestinians have been suffering because of the leadership vacuum they have created in West Bank and also in Gaza, where both leaders, they do not represent the people. They continue to act as the acting authority when there is no election.
But finally, a way forward, in the truce that we are seeing, will we see the Sheikh Jarrah matter resolved and Israel really backing off from those evictions and occupying areas which were given to Palestinians under the United Nations aegis?
Well, I think, Geeta, let's recognize and understand and admit that 1967 occupation after the 4th of June war, which Israel have taken the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip, these are occupied territory under the international law and United Nations Security Council. 300 resolutions are on this regard. Now, if you wanted only to have one color and you give only the authority to 100 nationalities of Israeli settlers who can come and get the Israeli citizenship, and you treat the Arabs, especially those 1948 Palestinians who have taken the Israeli identity as a second and third citizen, I think we are heading for more trouble. I don't think this focus will die away, but at least it will put a halt to the settlement activity. You know, after Oslo Agreement, from 125,000 settlers in Palestine, in the occupied territory, now we have 850,000 settlers. So the settlement is increasing. It has become an abundant, mushrooming everywhere in the occupied territories. So where are we heading? Therefore, if this settlement does not put a halt to it, the Israeli authority, and there's an international pressure, I think the focus will be more now on Jerusalem, because Jerusalem has been, even during the division by United Nations Security Council resolution, 1948, it was depending that it will remain as an international city, that none of them can claim that it is their own. So therefore, it has to remain that way. Otherwise, the status quo, if you are trying to change demographically, believe me, we are getting more headline, more blood. What worries me is that now, after this war, where most of the kids have been killed, the women have been slaughtered, and there are 75,000 internally displaced, there is a ground for radicalism, extremism, terrorism, and many countries in the region, regional players, will take full advantage of the Islamic sentiment to ride on the backs of these people and destroy the place. So you do not live in a very stable region. You will land it in a very volatile, and you will continue permanent wars.
While the halt is temporary, while the truce could very well be temporary, the focus and monitoring would be on what Israel does next when it comes to Jerusalem. Dr. Awad, many thanks for joining us here on World Today. Welcome back to World Today. Caught amid rocket fires and aerial bombings are people. Arab Muslims and Israeli Jews, both crying for help. Their homes destroyed, businesses destroyed, and lives lost. It would take years before they really recover.
The sirens warned them to look for shelter. More than a week into the war, these paramedics and residents in southern Israel ran for cover from incoming rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. Around the same time, Israeli women staged a protest outside Jerusalem's old city walls. They want peaceful coexistence between Jews and Arabs. While the rocket attacks and counter-attacks continued, number of injured kept rising in the hospitals.
من مجزرة الوحدة وجينا على دار خوهان عند مدرسة بشير الرئيس قلنا منطقة يعني فيش فيها شيء مش عمارة وعلى الفاضي قصفنا والله ما إله فيه شيء والله ما إله فيه شيء مسكين الله يرحمه
Seven-year-old Susie hardly speaks or eats. She belongs to Arab Muslim community in Gaza. It's been 2 days since she was pulled from the rubble of what was once her family's home. It was destroyed in a barrage of Israeli airstrikes. She spent hours buried in the wreckage as her siblings and mother died around her.
سمعت أصوات أطفالي من تحت الأنقاض وهم ينادون علي ولا أقدر أعمل سمعت صوت زين وهو ينادي بابا بابا وفجأة فقدت صوته عمره 2.5 سنين وبنتي كانت تنادي علي بابا بابا بعض الكلمات وفقدت الصوت قلت اللهم احتسبهم عند الله شهداء لكن ربنا أراد انه يبعد شخص يسمعني من تحت الأنقاض وانا بقول يا الله يا الله يا الله ويعني تم الحمد لله نجاتي من الحفرة اللي انا كنت فيها وخرجت بسلام وانا بنتي بعد 5 ساعات يعني انتشلوها من تحت الأنقاض وباقي الأفراد العائلة وزوجتي شهداء.
Things are no better for the Israelis. The Sahar family lost their home in a Hamas rocket attack last week. Since then, they have been running in and out of the shelter of a hotel in southern Israel. There are other families who share the same fate like them.
I feel like every time I heard the boom, if it's door that has been closed or everything that maybe sounds like the rockets falling, it's give me a panic attack. It's something that it's hard for me to describe the worst feeling that I feeling and felt. It was hard and it's still hard, and I don't think I will be able to get over it in the last few months.
As the conflict between Israel's military and militants in Gaza raged on, the 2 million civilians living in Gaza City were caught in this crossfire. At least 213 Palestinians have been killed in the airstrikes, including 61 children, with more than 1,440 people wounded. On the other hand, 12 people in Israel, including a 5-year-old boy and a soldier, have been killed so far.
والكهرباء فيش بتجيك ساعة وبتقطع يعني فيش لازمنا نشغل على خط المولي والاسلاك رايحة فيش عندنا كهرباء ولا في عندنا نت ولا في عندنا مية ولا في عندنا أي شيء واش بدنا نعمل؟ يعني هذا زلمة عمره 81 سنة إيه كان هنا الحيطة ضربت الشباك ضرب عليه أنا كنت نايم جنبه الحيطان كلها وقعت علينا الثلاجة طار علينا لما قمت أنا صحيت هو هذا بيعرف يرمي صواريخ هو هذا بيعمل ما هذا مدني هذا من بير في السن إيش بده يعمل أنتوا تضربوا في حق المدنيين.
Celebrated Israeli chef Uri Buri has been running a restaurant for 35 years in the northern coastal city of Akko. Both Arab and Jewish Israelis would dine together in his restaurant. It was set on fire and destroyed by Israeli Arabs in a communal violence as the rocket strike started. But Buri feels no need for revenge.
I try to ignore and not to reach a point of feeling hatred, because it doesn't lead to anything that is positive. I have no intention to take revenge. We have to take care to reach the highest standard of coexistence. Otherwise, in order to guarantee the future of all of us, and give a better future to our children and grandchildren.
The conflict has also affected foreign nationals living in Gaza. Tuesday's rocket attack from Gaza hit a packaging plant, killing 2 Thai workers and wounding 8.
University, we have lots of shelter rooms in our...
Indian researchers studying in Tel Aviv looked for shelter within the university every time a siren went off.
Then in case of emergency, you have...
In southern Israel, an Indian cricket club with a 2-story building became a shelter home for locals with an underground floor to survive rocket attacks.
That's all in this edition of World Today. There is a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas for now. The bigger question is, will Israel and Palestine come to the talking table and find a permanent solution to the conflict between the two sides and find a solution to the Palestinian question that really is the answer to peace in Middle East, in West Asia? Thank you and goodbye.